Good evening. Thank you for being with us. This is our current events update weekly in English on a Friday night. I'm Leah Hogg, live from Net TV studios. Today we're discussing COVID-19 from a legal point of view, medical and economic. And we're joined straight away by Nikos Passas. He's a professor of criminology and criminal justice, and we're joining with him in Boston. Good evening, Professor.
Hello, good evening.
How are you? Thank you for joining the program.
My pleasure.
We spoke a lot about COVID-19, and we're obviously now at a more mature stage. There have been a lot of new crimes that perhaps you can talk us through, crimes that people are committing with the outbreak of the virus.
Well, it's important to understand the kind of environment in which certain types of misconduct thrive. And in order to do that, you have to explain three things: what opportunities arise, why people take advantage of these opportunities, and what makes the controls inadequate or weaken them. And what I have found is that one way of organizing different contributing factors is that of criminogenic asymmetries. When you have structural and other disjunctions or differences in the spheres of law, politics, economy, administrative patterns, culture, technology, health, and so on, these asymmetries do all these three things at the same time. So let me give you an example so that you can see what I'm talking about. Take one from history. There was a time where in the United States we were trying to distinguish what is toxic waste.
It's quite a bad line. It's quite a bad line. I don't know if the connection's right. Okay, let's carry on. I think it's all right. Sorry, Professor, if we can carry on.
You can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
So I wanted to give you an example of a legal asymmetry that creates illegal markets. There was a time when in the United States we were trying to establish what is toxic waste in order to protect society so that we do not mix what is dangerous byproducts of industrial processes with ordinary garbage. So the problem was that there was no federal definition, and defining toxic waste was left to the states. Each state, therefore, had its own standard. For example, in New Jersey, where you had a lot of chemical industry, they had a very good list and a very good definition of what substance qualifies as toxic and therefore needs to be processed, disposed of in a very particular way, which is more expensive, 10 times more expensive than just dumping it in the ground or the lakes or putting it together with the other rubbish. Pennsylvania, however, next door to New Jersey, had absolutely no definition at all. So what happened in this situation was that people were picking up what was defined as toxic waste in New Jersey, transporting it across the river to Pennsylvania and dumping it on the ground there. That is what I call a crime without law violation, by the way, because they didn't break any law in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania didn't criminalize this because they didn't have a definition of what is toxic waste. It was criminal in the other jurisdiction where the waste originated. So people took advantage of that, and they were taking this toxic waste, transporting it, and inexpensively dumping it, and creating a competitive advantage for those industries that were using them for this kind of disposal, right? So as the world globalizes, every time you have legal differences in the different systems that interact with each other, such opportunities arise. The same example you can find with taxes. Some countries have high taxation, others have more moderate or none. The same things you can find with money laundering laws. Some are very strict and well enforced. In others are weak, lax, or not enforced at all. And people take advantage of these, and sometimes they have very good advisors to do this. Now, with COVID-19, we have all kinds of asymmetry that create all kinds of illegal markets because we have new opportunities when you have demand and supply asymmetries, for example, in personal protective equipment, the PPE, the masks, ventilators, particular drugs, and so on. That creates a market for people to sell you what they have, and this would be counterfeit or substandard products, and take them from one jurisdiction to another, and take advantage of the fact that one does not.
Yes. Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you. I mean, you've only scratched the surface today, I know, and the crime goes on to corporations, to governments, but our time is short, and I thank you very much for joining us. Thank you. That was Professor Nikos Passas, an expert in criminology. And in the studio tonight, my guests are Dr. Joe Giglio, a criminal lawyer, the Honourable Dr. Kristy Debono and Professor Mark Brinkat. So we're going to, I hope, look at COVID from all sorts of aspects. Can I start with you, Dr. Giglio? After hearing Professor Passas, how does what he said, how does that apply to us in Malta?
Well, it applies to us in the very same way that he explained it. We are nothing different to these realities. And then crime is a situation whereby you automatically have an increase in crime, where you have problems related to economic problems, or you have people who are suffering, who are not in the same financial situation that they had before. So it's not much different, really. It is natural in the criminal field to have a situation like this. It is also natural here in Malta that, for example, insofar as drug supplies are concerned, you would also have a situation like he explained is happening way back in the United States, where clearly the amount of drugs are available and the amount of drugs coming in is less, and then you start going to synthetic things, you start going things which are more heavily diluted with other substances. And yes, we too would be experiencing the same situation. It is COVID-19 related, yes, but it is essentially related because crime and the incidence of crime very much depends on what is happening in the country as a whole. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean, obviously, that drug use is less when there isn't a pandemic. Drug use is still there, but what happens is that it is more difficult to find drugs, and therefore, since it is more difficult to find drugs, either the price of drugs is going to go up even more, and if it's going to go up even more, people need more cash and more money to find that drug, or else you're going to have drugs which aren't actually as pure or as they should be. Obviously, it's not.
Yes,
drugs are always very bad. There's no doubt about that, but
yes,
it is very, very similar. The situation in Malta would be similar. We're nothing different to what is happening in the rest of the world.
So most countries would be the same. Kristy, how does this apply on an economic level, the crime factor that COVID-19 has brought about?
Yes, COVID-19 has left a lot of casualties. The obvious casualty is, from the health perspective, the number of COVID cases and the number of people who have been affected and the number of deaths locally and worldwide. However, when there is economy as a major casualty as well, and then it will give rise to the unrest, to more criminality, as Dr. Giglio has just explained, when there is lack of cash flow. So more people will, by default, will turn to criminality. When there is the lack of hope, or else we are in uncharted territories at the moment. So most people, even the fact that there is no hope and there is the lack of certainty, most people as well will not only not invest, however, they once again will turn to petty crimes, to thefts, to criminality. Unfortunately, however, Leah, we started some months ago when the first cases of COVID were detected from a country which had a low number of cases, and it was not at the expense of our economy. The economy, after constant pressure from the opposition, from the civil societies, and from even trade unions and all the major parties, the government had invested heavily through incentives and even fiscal measures. So the taxpayers' money were invested well to combat the economic impact of COVID. However, only now, a few weeks down the line, all this sacrifice and all this hard work has now become in vain. We are in a situation where there is unprecedented numbers every day. We have become from one of the best performers to one of the very, very, very worst performers. We are being blacklisted, basically from all the tourist destinations that we usually depend on as a country. However, not usually say we are investing in the health sector, maybe at the expense of the economy or vice versa. Now we're in a situation where both major sectors, the health and the economy, are at an all-time low. From the COVID perspective, obviously, of the health perspective, and economy, where before we had some sort of hope. Now we're in a situation where even if you speak to the businessman, to the business society, to everyone, given the working mothers who do not even know if this coming September will commence schools as usual. So even their professional and their job is at stake. Their careers are at stake. The business sector. Just last week, there was a survey by GRTU where 87% of the business community, of the SMEs, are at an all-time low, because there is not even the hope that I mentioned, the hope that things will get better. Because without a clear strategy, without a clear